His broad shoulders, once accustomed to the precise movements of a drafting table and the intellectual weight of groundbreaking designs, now ached with the memory of construction sites and graveyard shifts at a warehouse. He pulled the thin, scratchy airline blanket tighter, trying to ward off the persistent chill that seemed to emanate from his precarious financial situation. He looked down at his worn, patched suit jacket, carefully folded on the seat beside him. It was his last good suit, meticulously pressed with a borrowed iron, and he'd chosen the cheapest carry-on to avoid baggage fees, stuffing his meager possessions into it with practiced efficiency. Every dollar, every cent was accounted for, rationed with the precision of a wartime rationer. He ate a single stale cracker from a small plastic bag, saving the half-eaten granola bar for later. His primary focus, his unwavering North Star, was his 7-year-old daughter, Maya. She was at home miles away with their kind but aging neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, a woman whose fading memory worried Alex almost as much as his empty bank account. Before the cabin door sealed them in, he'd sent Maya a quick, heartfelt text, a promise whispered across the digital divide. "Be home soon, my little co-pilot. Miss you already." He pictured her bright, trusting eyes, her infectious giggle, and the thought was a quiet anchor in the churning sea of his anxiety. The persistent worry about Maya's lingering cough, a cough that should have seen a doctor weeks ago, but for the prohibitive cost, tightened a knot in his chest. Eviction notices and overdue utility bills were constant, unwelcome companions in his thoughts, a quiet dread that never fully dissipated. As the plane began its slow taxi towards the runway, Alex's gaze drifted to the intricate mechanics of the wing outside his window. His eyes, though weary, sharpened, tracing the efficiency of the wing flaps' movement, an almost instinctual understanding blooming in his mind. He absently noted a faint, unusual whine from the starboard engine, a sound so subtle most passengers wouldn't register it, but to his finely tuned ear it was a discordant note in the symphony of the powerful jet. He picked up an aviation magazine from the seat pocket, idly flipping through its glossy pages. His eyes lingered on a complex schematic diagram of a cutting-edge engine design, tracing the labyrinthine systems with a familiar ease. For a fleeting moment the weight lifted, and the vibrant hum of his past life, as a brilliant aircraft designer, an ace in the truest sense of the word, flickered to life. A faded, almost invisible tattoo adorned his inner wrist, partially hidden by his sleeve. It was a stylized schematic diagram of a turbine engine, its intricate gears and rotors etched in a delicate, almost washed-out ink. It was an emblem of his former life, a quiet reminder of a past he had deliberately abandoned, a life of high-stakes engineering, of breakthroughs and accolades, which had crumbled beneath the weight of an undisclosed professional trauma and a profound burnout. He had chosen anonymity, chosen a life of quiet struggle, all for Maya, for the fragile peace he believed he could give her. The cabin filled with the last trickle of boarding passengers, their hurried movements and overflowing carry-ons, adding to the general pre-flight bustle. An elderly woman in the row directly ahead of Alex struggled visibly with her heavy carry-on bag. It was an oversized, bulging monstrosity that refused to yield to her frail strength, clearly exceeding the airline's weight limits. She strained her face, reddening with effort, her thin arms trembling as she attempted to heave it into the overhead bin. The flight attendant, harried and overworked, was busy barking instructions at a latecomer, seemingly oblivious to the woman's plight. Other passengers, buried in their phones or lost in their own anxieties, averted their gaze, eager to settle into their flight without incident or interruption. Despite his own fatigue, the persistent ache in his lower back from a recent heavy lifting job, and the crushing weight of his personal worries, Alex didn't hesitate. Without a second thought, without a flicker of self-consciousness or a glance at his watch, he unbuckled his seatbelt. With quiet strength and gentle care, he stood up, moving quickly but smoothly towards her. "Here, ma'am, let me help you with that." He offered, his voice low and kind. He took the cumbersome bag from her, his strong hands easily lifting it as if it weighed nothing, and carefully, meticulously placed it into the overhead bin, ensuring it was securely stowed. He then turned back to her, offering a warm, reassuring smile, his eyes conveying a genuine concern. "There you go, all set." The woman's face, initially etched with frustration, softened into a grateful smile. "Oh, thank you, young man," she murmured, her voice raspy with relief. "You're a lifesaver." This small act of selfless kindness, a brief moment of connection in a sea of strangers, immediately established Alex's inherent goodness and humility, securing an unwavering empathy from any observer. He wasn't seeking recognition. He was simply being helpful, a quiet act of grace that spoke volumes about his character. As he settled back into his cramped seat, the faint, unusual whine from the engine outside seemed to grow a little louder, a subtle, almost imperceptible dissonance in the rhythmic hum of the plane. Alex, however, was no longer focused on the engine, but on the small, worn photo of Maya tucked into his wallet. He held it tightly, a quiet promise to her future resonating deep within him. Unbeknownst to him, the faint hum of the aircraft was about to transform into a shriek of terror, and his carefully constructed anonymity was about to shatter, revealing the extraordinary man hidden beneath the ordinary facade. The flight had settled into the monotonous hum of routine. Alex, trying to distract himself from the gnawing anxiety about Maya, had drifted into a fitful sleep, lulled by the steady drone of the engines. The flight attendants moved quietly through the cabin, offering lukewarm drinks and bland snacks. Passengers read, watched movies on their personal devices, or simply dozed, suspended in the temporary sterile bubble of air travel. Then, without warning, the world tilted. Not a gentle bank, but a violent, sickening lurch that threw every passenger against their restraints. A deafening roar, unlike any engine noise, ripped through the cabin, accompanied by a terrifying shudder that vibrated through every bone. The cheerful cabin lights flickered wildly, then died, plunging the interior into a disorienting, strobing chaos as emergency lights flared intermittently. This was no typical engine failure. This was something far more complex and terrifying. The plane, a massive metallic bird, began to fall. Not a controlled descent, but a rapid, uncontrolled plunge like a stone dropped from the sky. Alarms blared, a cacophony of shrill, overlapping shrieks competing with the terrified screams of passengers. Oxygen masks dropped from the overhead compartments, dangling uselessly as the cabin plunged into chaos, a blizzard of falling personal items, terrified faces, and the raw, guttural sounds of fear. The pilot's voice, usually calm and reassuring, crackled over the intercom, strained with undisguised panic, announcing an unforeseen critical systems failure. His words were punctuated by a violent jolt that sent the plane listing sharply to the left, its wings dipping precariously. The flight crew was overwhelmed, their training useless against a catastrophe of this scale. They shouted frantic, unheeded instructions, their own faces etched with terror. This wasn't an ordinary mechanical issue that could be fixed with a checklist. It was a deep systemic breakdown, a critical structural component unexpectedly failing, sending shockwaves through the entire aircraft's delicate balance. It was a design flaw manifesting under extreme conditions, a ghost in the machine, that only a very specific kind of genius, one who understood the very bones and sinews of these metal beasts, could possibly comprehend. In the first terrifying moments of the descent, a figure emerged from the first-class cabin, pushing through the terrified passengers with a desperate urgency. It was Elias Thorne, the CEO of Thorne Aerospace, the very airline they were plummeting on. His usual composure, the impenetrable mask of the self-made billionaire, was utterly shattered. His impeccably tailored suit was disheveled, his silver hair askew, and his eyes, usually cold and calculating, were wide with sheer primal terror. He was a man accustomed to having absolute control, to dictating outcomes, to wielding immense power. Now he was utterly, terrifyingly powerless. His entire empire, built on a reputation for safety, reliability, and cutting-edge technology, was collapsing around him, quite literally from 30,000 feet. He staggered to the front of the first-class cabin, his hands shaking as he fumbled for the intercom, pushing aside a petrified flight attendant. His voice, usually a booming, authoritative baritone, crackled through the cabin raw with an uncharacteristic plea, a desperate cry for salvation that cut through the screams and the blaring alarms. "Is there anyone on this flight? Anyone with deep expertise in aerospace engineering? Anyone who can understand this? My company offers anything. Everything. If you can help us, we're going down." The desperate plea hung in the air, a testament to his shattered control, his desperate recognition of his own powerlessness. Alex, clutching the small, worn photo of Maya, was consumed by primal fear. Not for himself, but for her. His mind raced, replaying every moment with her, every hug, every whispered bedtime story. The terror of leaving her alone, of her growing up without him, was a physical ache in his chest almost unbearable. He closed his eyes, gripping the photo so tightly his knuckles turned white, preparing for the inevitable, for the worst. The plane shuddered again, more violently this time, sending another wave of screams through the cabin. A panel above his head popped open, spewing a fine mist. He could feel the desperate, uncontrolled bucking of the aircraft, the sickening lurch of losing altitude. He felt the overwhelming urge to remain anonymous, to stay hidden in his insignificant row 17, to let the world believe he was just another broken man too insignificant to make a difference. His past failures, the guilt he carried, the shame of his reduced circumstances, they whispered to him, urging him to remain hidden, to accept his fate. He was a man who had chosen to step away, to hide his brilliance, to live a quiet life of struggle, convinced he was safer in the shadows. But Elias Thorne's desperate plea, raw and unadulterated by pride, echoed through the chaos. It was not just a plea for help, it was an admission of complete vulnerability from a man who embodied unshakable strength. And as Alex listened, as the plane continued its terrifying plunge, something stirred deep within him. It was the dormant brilliance, the forgotten passion for engineering, the insatiable need to solve the unsolvable puzzle. He saw the panic in the flight attendants' eyes, the helplessness of the passengers, the terror etched on every face. He understood the mechanics of the failure, not through a manual or a diagnostic tool, but through an intuitive, visceral comprehension of the aircraft's design, something no one else seemed to grasp. He knew with a terrifying certainty that he alone might hold the key to their survival. He hesitated, torn between the anonymity he had painstakingly built and the overwhelming, undeniable need to act. The thought of not trying, of letting fear win when he might possess the answer, was unbearable. The image of Maya's trusting smile flashed in his mind, then faded, replaced by the terrifying vision of her growing up without him knowing he could have tried, but hadn't. That thought was a far greater terror than any plane crash. He took a deep, ragged breath, a silent commitment to a path from which there would be no return. The weight of his past, the burden of his guilt, momentarily lifted, replaced by a singular burning purpose. He unbuckled his seatbelt, his movements deliberate amidst the chaos. He pushed past the terrified passengers in his row, his eyes fixed on the front of the cabin, on the source of the desperate plea. He was no longer just the broke single dad in row 17. He was Ace Riley, the engineer, the problem solver, the man who had once designed the very systems that were now failing around them. He rose from his seat, a solitary figure moving against the tide of panic, and made his way towards the cockpit, silently committing to a path from which there was no return. His anonymity, his quiet life was about to be irrevocably shattered, but perhaps, just perhaps, so was the certainty of death. Alex pushed through the chaotic cabin, a figure of contained urgency moving against the tide of rising panic. Passengers gripped by terror clawed at their seats, some openly weeping, others staring blankly at the dropped oxygen masks. He moved with a purpose that stood in stark contrast to the widespread fear. His focus narrowed, his mind already dissecting the unseen mechanics of their plummeting descent. He reached the cockpit door, its reinforced frame now the last barrier between the terrifying reality of the falling plane and any hope of a solution. Inside, the scene was one of desperate professional struggle. The two pilots, Captain Miller and First Officer Jenkins, were white-faced and strained their hands, wrestling with unresponsive controls. The cockpit bristled with a symphony of blaring alarms, flashing red lights, and the guttural groan of the airframe, protesting its unnatural trajectory. Elias Thorne was already there, his face a mask of raw desperation, shouting frantic questions at the pilots, his usual air of detached authority replaced by the primal fear of a man facing his own mortality. Alex, battered and unassuming in his rumpled suit, forced his way into the cramped space. "I'm an aerospace engineer," he announced, his voice surprisingly calm amidst the din. "I can help." The initial reaction was immediate skepticism, bordering on contempt. Captain Miller, a veteran pilot with decades of experience, spared him a dismissive glance. "Sir, this is a cockpit, not a passenger lounge. Get back to your seat." First Officer Jenkins, younger and more agitated, added, "We don't need a civilian interfering, we're following protocols." Even Elias Thorne, who had just issued a desperate plea over the intercom, looked at Alex with a mixture of disbelief and irritation. A disheveled passenger, he thought, his mind already scrambling to spin a narrative that would minimize this chaotic intervention. "This is not what I meant by deep expertise. This is a desperate, unkempt nobody." Alex didn't argue. He didn't boast. His eyes, clear and focused, darted across the flickering displays, taking in the rapid descent rate, the chaotic readings from the flight control surfaces, the ominously flashing hydraulic pressure gauges. He listened intently to the groan of the airframe, the subtle high-pitched whine that spoke of internal stresses. He ignored the skeptical glares, the dismissive gestures. He was already seeing beyond the symptoms into the very heart of the problem. "It's not an engine failure," Alex stated calmly, his voice cutting through the alarms. "And it's not a full hydraulic loss. The primary flight controls are erratic because the trim tabs are desynchronized." He pointed to a specific complex diagram flickering on a secondary display. "There's a hairline fracture in the non-redundant hydraulic line connecting to the trim tabs. It's too small to trigger a full system warning, but it's causing an intermittent cascading pressure loss. It's subtly desynchronizing the flight control surfaces and creating unrecoverable aerodynamic instability. It's a critical design flaw." He paused, looking directly at Elias Thorne. "A flaw, Mr. Thorne, that I warned about years ago in a discarded proposal for the 747X model. It's a design vulnerability where a single point of failure in a specific high-stress scenario can bring down the entire system. A ghost in the hydraulic lines." Elias Thorne, despite his initial contempt, was forced to listen. The precision of Alex's diagnosis, the immediate and startlingly accurate assessment of a problem that had stumped his most senior engineers, forced a chilling realization upon him. He watched transfixed as Alex, with quiet confidence, began to dissect the intricate failure. He saw the rapid understanding, the depth of knowledge that transcended mere technical skill. This wasn't memorized protocol, it was intuitive genius. His internal monologue, initially dismissive, shifted from irritation to a dawning, terrifying clarity. This man isn't just a passenger, he's a potential savior, and also a very dangerous witness. A cold, calculating dread began to settle in Elias's stomach. This wasn't just a catastrophic mechanical failure. It was a design flaw, one he had perhaps overlooked or worse ignored in the relentless pursuit of speed and cost efficiency during the plane's development. If this got out, if the world knew that a fundamental design flaw, one warned about by an engineer who had once been considered a maverick, had nearly brought down one of his planes, it would ruin his entire company. His thoughts immediately turned to damage control. How to keep this quiet? How to spin this? How to make sure this broken dad doesn't expose the underlying design flaw that could ruin my entire empire? Without a word, Elias subtly signaled to his personal security detail, who were also on board, now hovering anxiously near the cockpit door. Derek Vance, Alex's estranged, resentful older brother, now a ruthless corporate fixer who had risen through Elias's ranks by proving his unwavering loyalty and discretion, caught Elias's eye. Derek, a man whose ambition was as sharp as his tailored suits, immediately understood Elias's unspoken intent. His eyes, cold and assessing, fixed on Alex. "So little brother decided to show up," Derek thought, a bitter taste in his mouth. "Still playing the hero even after you abandoned everything." Derek had always resented Alex's effortless brilliance, the way Alex had seemed to glide through engineering challenges, while Derek had to claw his way up through sheer grit and ruthlessness. Alex's past failures, his quiet retreat from the world of high-stakes aerospace, had given Derek a twisted satisfaction. Now, seeing Alex here, potentially saving Elias's company and reclaiming his lost glory, filled Derek with a familiar, searing envy. He would not let that happen. His own long-simmering resentment towards Alex's past brilliance, which he always viewed as effortlessly overshadowing his own hard work and careful climb, fueled his desire to see Alex fail, or at least be silenced and unable to claim full credit. Alex, oblivious to the silent, venomous communication between the brothers, continued to explain his proposed solution, his voice calm and authoritative, cutting through the cockpit's rising panic. "We need to manually override the trim tab system. It's risky, but we can temporarily repressurize the affected line by bleeding pressure from a non-critical redundant system. It'll give us partial control enough to slow the descent and attempt a controlled glide." Captain Miller, his face streaked with sweat, looked at Elias. Elias, seeing the desperate hope flickering in the pilot's eyes, knew he had no choice. He needed this man. He needed the impossible. "Do it," Elias ordered, his voice strained. "Whatever he says, do it." However, even as he gave his grudging permission, Elias secretly instructed Derek. "Ensure Mr. Riley's actions are strictly controlled. No unauthorized information leaves this cockpit. And no heroic narratives. This is an internal matter. Understand. Derek simply nodded his eyes, never leaving Alex. He began to subtly interfere, a corporate saboteur, operating under the guise of assistance. He misplaced a small critical tool Alex needed to access a panel, then accidentally kicked a communication cable to the flight data recorder, causing a momentary glitch in its logging. He would delay relaying critical information from the aircraft's maintenance logs, making Alex cross-reference data points on the fly. He also started to subtly introduce minor distractions, whispering barbed comments about Alex's past failures, his supposed cowardice in abandoning his promising career, and his neglect of his family for his engineering obsession. He watched a dark satisfaction curling in his gut as Alex, under unimaginable pressure, began his impossible task. The ghost in the machine was still there, but a new, more insidious threat had just entered the cockpit. The cockpit, once a sanctuary of controlled chaos, had transformed into the ultimate arena. Outside the reinforced glass, the world blurred into a terrifying, rapidly approaching canvas of green and brown. The ground was no longer an abstract concept. It was visible, horrifyingly close, rushing towards them with an accelerating vengeance. The pilots, Captain Miller and First Officer Jenkins, their faces contorted with stress, wrestled with the unresponsive controls, their desperate efforts proving futile against the complex, cascading failure Alex had identified. The incessant shriek of alarms was a constant, piercing reminder of their dwindling time. Alex, positioned between the two pilots, his body swaying with the violent lurches of the plane, worked with a furious intensity. His proposed solution was a desperate improvisation, a precise, almost impossible series of manual adjustments to the trim tabs, the small movable surfaces on the trailing edge of the wings that control pitch and roll. This had to be coordinated with calculated thrust variations and a risky bleed of pressure from a non-critical redundant hydraulic system to temporarily restore partial pressure to the damaged line. It wasn't a textbook procedure. It was a dance with disaster, a high-stakes gamble against physics and the very limits of human endurance. Every instruction Alex barked, every precise movement of his hands as he guided the pilots was scrutinized, not only by the terrified flight attendants and the few passengers who dared to peer into the cockpit, but also by Elias Thorne. The CEO, his usual air of command, now a mask of desperate hope and simmering paranoia, watched Alex with an intensity that burned through the chaos. He was already calculating how to control the narrative, how to spin this near catastrophe into a minimal incident, how to minimize the exposure of his company's design flaw. The looming crash was no longer abstract. It was a terrifying, tangible reality, a specter of ruin that threatened to swallow his empire whole. Despite the collaborative effort, Alex was profoundly isolated. The pilots followed his instructions with grim determination, but their understanding was limited, their trust fragile. They saw him as a desperate gamble, a last fleeting hope, not an infallible expert. Elias Thorne's watchful presence added another layer of pressure, a silent threat to Alex's anonymity, and potentially his freedom should he survive. But the most insidious pressure came from within. Derek Vance, Alex's estranged brother, moved with a deceptive calm within the confined space of the cockpit. He had positioned himself near Alex's side ostensibly to assist, but his true intent was a venomous undercurrent in the already strained atmosphere. Derek's internal monologue seethed with a deep-seated resentment, a desire to see Alex fail, or at least be unable to fully claim credit for any success. This isn't fair. He thought, his eyes narrowed as he watched Alex's nimble fingers adjust a delicate setting. He always had it so easy, that effortless brilliance. While I fought and clawed my way up, he just walked away. Now he swoops in the hero to fix the mess. Not on my watch. He began his insidious sabotage. "Mr. Riley, perhaps you need this tool," Derek would ask, offering the wrong wrench with a practiced innocence. "Oh, my apologies. It seems I misplaced the correct one." He would subtly kick a communication cable to the flight data recorder, causing a momentary glitch in its logging, forcing Alex to waste precious seconds re-establishing the connection. When Alex asked for specific readings from the aircraft's maintenance logs, Derek would delay, feigning difficulty, or provide subtly incorrect data points, forcing Alex to cross-reference multiple displays and make split-second corrections on the fly. "Still chasing ghosts, are we, Alex?" Derek would whisper his voice, a low, taunting murmur only Alex could hear over the alarms. "Remember that last project? The one you walked away from, left everyone else to clean up your mess." He'd make barbed comments about Alex's past failures, his supposed cowardice in abandoning his promising career, and his neglect of his family for his engineering obsession. Maya would be better off with someone stable. He'd murmur, hitting Alex where it hurt the most. These were not just distractions. They were psychological attacks designed to erode Alex's focus, to trigger the profound guilt and self-doubt that had driven him from the industry years ago. Alex had to navigate not only the immediate crisis of the falling plane, but also his brother's insidious sabotage and the crushing weight of his own past guilt, all while battling the clock. The cockpit clock, its red digits stark against the gloom, ticked relentlessly, a brutal, visible representation of their dwindling time. Ground control, their voices increasingly frantic, blared through the cockpit speakers. "Impact in T-minus 12 minutes. 10 minutes. Every second lost to technical difficulties, human error, or Derek's deliberate interference amplified the tension to a near breaking point. The altitude dropped rapidly, the ground rushed closer, its features becoming terrifyingly distinct. Alex pushed past the pain of a recent injury, a torn rotator cuff from a heavy lifting job, still unhealed, a cruel legacy of his manual labor days, working with a focused intensity that transcended physical discomfort. His mind raced through calculations, dozens of them per second, processing the erratic data from the displays, anticipating the plane's next violent lurch. His hands moved with surgical precision, despite the severe G-forces buffeting the plane, compensating for every tremor, every shift in air pressure. And then the glitch he had suspected, the one he had tried to ignore, became a terrifying reality. It was an intermittent, almost undetectable failure in the flight control software's error correction protocol, a subtle bug that only manifested under specific extreme hydraulic pressure fluctuations, precisely the conditions created by the damaged line. It was causing micro-deviations in the trim tab, responses fractions of a degree that at their current speed and altitude meant the difference between life and death. This subtle software anomaly was the true ghost in the machine, and he had to correct it on the fly, relying solely on his intuitive understanding of the system's deep architecture, all while manually controlling the plane and battling his brother's insidious sabotage. The whispers about his past failures, his abandonment of his career, echoed in his mind, threatening to undermine his focus, to drown him in a sea of self-doubt. He was not just fixing a plane. He was fighting his own demons. As the world fell around him, a desperate symphony of desperation playing out in the plummeting aircraft. The cockpit was a symphony of chaos now reaching its crescendo. The ground, a patchwork of fields and scattered buildings, surged upwards with terrifying speed, filling the entire viewport. Alarms shrieked relentlessly, each piercing note a countdown to oblivion. The control column shuddered violently in Captain Miller's grasp, completely unresponsive to his frantic adjustments. Elias Thorne, pale as a ghost, clutched the armrests of his seat, his eyes wide with unadulterated terror. The air crackled with a desperate primal fear. Then, just as Alex was about to issue his final critical sequence of commands, a blur of movement from his left caught his eye. Derek Vance, his face a grim mask of satisfaction, lunged forward. His hand shot out not towards the controls, but subtly towards Alex's personal diagnostic console, where a critical override was being prepared. He aimed for a small, recessed emergency power cutoff switch, a desperate final act of sabotage designed to disable Alex's interface, to ensure his brother's ultimate public failure. It was the ultimate chaotic moment, a truly breathless moment, where everything seemed irrevocably lost. The world outside the windows was a blur of rapidly approaching ground, the final plunge imminent. But Alex, his reflexes honed by years of high-stakes crisis management and an intuitive understanding of human nature, reacted with preternatural speed. His left hand shot out, intercepting Derek's wrist in a vice-like grip, a silent, furious confrontation between brothers, playing out amidst the chaos. "Not now, Derek." Alex growled, his voice low and dangerous eyes blazing with a cold fury that silenced his brother's insidious taunts. He twisted Derek's arm, forcing him back against the cockpit wall, then without missing a beat, redirected his attention to the console. His fingers flew across the panel, overriding the power cutoff with a practiced flick, his mind racing through dozens of calculations per second. "Captain, full rudder left now!" He barked his voice, cutting through the din with an authority that compelled immediate obedience. First officer, initiate engine bypass manual override now. He then delicately adjusted the last working trim tab, pushing his injured rotator cuff past its screaming limits, forcing a minute but crucial aerodynamic correction. Simultaneously, with his right hand, he used his deep knowledge of the flight control software's undocumented debug pathways to initiate a rapid on-the-fly patch, correcting the subtle error correction glitch he had identified moments earlier, the ghost in the machine that no one else could see. This was a sequence of actions that no other human could replicate under such pressure, a testament to his unique genius and his past highly specialized training in system diagnostics and emergency protocols. The plane shuddered violently, a gut-wrenching tremor that threw everyone against their seats. For a split second, it seemed to lurch even further towards the ground. Then, miraculously, against all odds, the nose slowly, almost imperceptibly, began to lift. The shriek of the alarms lessened, replaced by a strained but steady hum from the engines. The descent rate slowed, then impossibly arrested. The plane leveled out, albeit roughly far below its intended altitude, flying barely above the treetops, but undeniably impossibly flying. A collective, shuddering sigh of relief swept across the cabin, quickly followed by a wave of hysterical sobs as passengers processed their near-death experience. Then, as the reality of their survival sank in, spontaneous roaring applause erupted, echoing through the cabin, a primal cheer of gratitude and awe. Elias Thorne, his face initially ashen with terror, then a mask of profound shock, stared at Alex. He saw not just a broken man in a rumpled suit, but a legend reborn, a genius whose brilliance had pulled them back from the precipice of oblivion. His arrogant disdain, his corporate hauteur, melted away, replaced by profound awe and a dawning, humbling realization. Elias, the man who prided himself on control, had been utterly helpless. Alex, the man he had dismissed, had commanded the sky. Elias stumbled towards the intercom, his hand shaking as he seized the microphone. His voice, now trembling with raw, unvarnished emotion, boomed through the cabin, amplified by the aircraft's restored internal systems. "Ladies and gentlemen, by the grace of God and the unparalleled genius of a passenger in row 17, Mr. Alex Riley, we are safe." He then turned, his eyes shining with unshed tears, and looked directly at Alex. "You saved us, Mr. Riley. You saved my company. You saved my life." His words were a complete public vindication for Alex, a declaration of his heroic actions to the world, witnessed by hundreds of terrified passengers, and unbeknownst to them recorded by the now functioning flight data recorder. Derek Vance, watching from the corner of the cockpit, saw his final, most elaborate act of vengeance spectacularly backfire. The brief, desperate struggle with Alex, his attempted sabotage, and Elias's public declaration shattered him. His face twisted into a snarl of impotent rage, a grotesque mask of defeat. His last vestiges of power, his carefully constructed reputation within Thorne Aerospace, were utterly shattered, replaced by bitter, suffocating defeat. The internet, initially frozen in terror and speculation, erupted with the news of the miraculous landing. Cell phone videos, shaky and tear-filled, of Elias Thorne's unprecedented public acknowledgement of an unknown passenger hero, flooded social media. Alex Riley's name, the quiet single dad from row 17, was now on everyone's lips, a testament to the power of one man's courage and a genius that had refused to stay hidden. He had not only fixed the unfixable, but had risen unexpectedly as the unforeseen architect of his own and everyone else's redemption. The relieved silence in the cockpit was swiftly broken by the efficient, if somewhat overwhelmed, chatter of ground control and emergency services. The plane, though scarred and shaken, had landed safely, albeit at a regional airport far from its intended destination. As paramedics rushed to attend to shaken passengers, and the media swarmed, the aftermath of the miracle landing began to unfold with a ruthless, almost surgical precision, particularly for those who had played a part in the near disaster. Derek Vance's swift and comprehensive downfall was a testament to Elias Thorne's newfound resolve and the irrefutable evidence. His desperate final attempt to sabotage Alex's console in the cockpit and the ensuing struggle between them had been meticulously captured by the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder. Elias Thorne's security team, highly trained and now on high alert, immediately secured these crucial pieces of evidence, along with the precise electromagnetic signature of the subtle software glitch that only Alex could have fixed. The detailed analysis of the subtle software anomaly, combined with the recording of Derek's attempts to disable Alex's interface, provided undeniable proof of his treachery. Elias Thorne, who had witnessed Derek's betrayal firsthand, was ruthless in his judgment. Derek was immediately and publicly fired from Thorne Aerospace. His name and face splashed across every news outlet as the corporate saboteur who nearly brought down a passenger plane. Within hours, his security clearances were revoked, and his professional certifications were suspended indefinitely by the leading aerospace guilds. He faced not only a multi-million-dollar civil suit from Thorne Aerospace for damages, but also a criminal investigation for attempted corporate sabotage and endangering a flight. His reputation within the corporate world, meticulously built on ruthlessness and a lack of ethics, was utterly destroyed. He lost everything: his lucrative job, his standing in the tech community, his last vestiges of pride, even the respect of his few remaining acquaintances. He was left isolated, disgraced, and facing a future behind bars, a just and comprehensive downfall that left him utterly powerless, his insidious envy finally costing him everything he had so desperately clawed to possess. Elias Thorne ensured he was blacklisted from any respectable corporate position, his betrayal an unforgivable stain on a company now hyper-focused on its redemption. The dust settled, and the sounds of legal battles and public outcry faded, replaced by the quiet hum of an extraordinary opportunity. Elias Thorne, deeply humbled and profoundly impressed by Alex's undeniable genius, didn't just offer him a reward. He offered him a partnership that would redefine his company and Alex's life. He invited Alex to Thorne Aerospace's sleek corporate headquarters, a gleaming monument to innovation a world away from his sawdust-scented apartment above the laundromat. There, in a glass-walled boardroom overlooking the city skyline, where Elias had once made decisions worth billions, he laid out his proposal. His demeanor was utterly transformed. The haughty arrogance that had once defined him was gone, replaced by a genuine respect, a quiet, almost reverent awe for the man who had saved his life and his empire. "Mr. Riley." Elias began, his voice devoid of its former condescension. "What you possess is not just skill, but visionary genius. It's a quality that our traditional methods, our conventional thinking, utterly failed to recognize." He acknowledged his past mistakes, his initial contempt, his blindness to talent outside his elite circles. "I was wrong, profoundly wrong, and I sincerely apologize for my dismissiveness, for my arrogance." His eyes, once cold and assessing, now held a hint of genuine vulnerability. "Your integrity and talent shone through my own prejudice." Then came the offer: a new cutting-edge division within Thorne Aerospace, one focused entirely on advanced flight safety systems, pioneering materials, research, and revolutionary aircraft design. This division, he proposed, would be led by Alex. "This isn't just a job, Mr. Riley." Elias stressed, his eyes earnest. "It's a platform for your brilliance, a chance to fully explore your most ambitious ideas without financial constraints or bureaucratic red tape. You will have state-of-the-art resources, a dedicated team, including the pilots Captain Miller and First Officer Jenkins, who are now fiercely loyal to you, and other engineers who witnessed your genius, and the complete authority to implement your vision." This new role provided Alex with not just immense financial stability, but also profound intellectual fulfillment, a respected place in a world he had once deliberately abandoned. It was a chance to bring his extraordinary ideas to life, to build things that truly mattered on a scale he could never have imagined as a struggling single dad. Alex, initially reserved, found himself undeniably drawn to the intellectual challenge, the sheer scope of the opportunity. It was a chance to use his gifts not just for survival, but for creation on a grand scale, to push the boundaries of aerospace engineering and redefine safety. The thought of shaping the future of aviation, of designing solutions that could genuinely prevent such terrifying incidents from ever happening again, was an irresistible pull. He accepted, a quiet sense of purpose settling deep within him. Elias, seeing Alex's unwavering dedication to Maya, also offered to fund Maya's education, entirely a gesture of profound gratitude that brought a lump to Alex's throat. Weeks later, amidst the quiet hum of the newly established R&D lab, a bright, spacious facility filled with gleaming prototypes, buzzing 3D printers, and an array of advanced diagnostic equipment, Alex and Elias shared a rare quiet moment, a brief pause in their demanding schedules. They were poring over blueprints for a new next-generation flight control system, one of Alex's groundbreaking designs that promised to revolutionize aircraft responsiveness and safety. "It's funny, isn't it?" Elias murmured, leaning back in his chair, a soft smile playing on his lips, a stark contrast to his once severe expression. "Our first meeting. You a passenger in row 17 and me shouting into an intercom like some madman barely able to breathe. I truly thought you were some kind of local eccentric, a desperate man trying to get attention." He shook his head, a genuine laugh, warm and melodious, escaping him. "I thought I knew everything about aviation, about what success looked like, what genuine expertise was. But you showed me how little I truly understood about genuine ingenuity and about courage that doesn't need a boardroom or a fancy degree to shine." Alex in turn chuckled softly, a comfortable sound. "And I saw a formidable CEO utterly out of his element trying to bluff his way through a problem he couldn't control. I just wanted to disappear back into my anonymous life, back to my simple life with Maya, away from all the pressure." He paused, his gaze softening as he looked at Elias, his hand reaching out to gently cover Elias's on the table, a gesture of newfound camaraderie. "But your desperate plea, despite its initial chaos, inadvertently forced me to confront my own buried potential, pulled me out of my self-imposed exile. It reminded me of a purpose I'd tried to forget, a part of myself I'd walled off." He hesitated, then took a deep breath. "My past. The reason I left high-stakes aerospace engineering behind, it was burnout mostly, and a particularly brutal incident on a prototype aircraft development. Too much pressure, too many interconnected systems, too many potential points of failure. I was lead designer on an experimental stealth aircraft project meant to test new aerodynamic principles. There was a critical flaw in a single line of control software I developed for the new integrated flight management system, a tiny oversight that in a split second led to a cascade of control surface anomalies during a high-speed test flight. The aircraft experienced a near-catastrophic departure from controlled flight incident. No one was seriously injured, and the pilot managed to recover, but the prototype was severely damaged and we lost significant R&D investment. The ensuing public and internal blame, despite my being cleared of direct fault, led to profound burnout and a desire to escape that kind of responsibility again. I couldn't bear the thought of that kind of pressure, the potential for failure that could impact lives. I just ran from it. I just wanted to build things I could touch, control, where the only consequence was a minor mechanical issue, not human lives." He gestured to the faded turbine engine tattoo on his inner forearm, now more visible beneath his rolled-up sleeve. This was the emblem of that unit, a specialized R&D branch focused on pushing the boundaries of aviation. I used to be proud of it, but after that one failure, I just ran and built a simple life for Maya away from all that pressure. Elias listened, his expression compassionate, his grip on Alex's hand tightening gently. "You ran to protect Maya," he said softly, understanding dawning fully in his eyes. "You built a safe world for her, a quiet sanctuary. And now," he squeezed Alex's hand, "you're using those very same skills, that very same brilliance, to build a safer, better future for countless others in a way that's truly profound." This shared vulnerability deepened their connection, sealing their bond not just as colleagues, but as true partners. Their conversations flowed easily, no longer strained by professional boundaries, a testament to a connection deeper than corporate titles or social strata. Alex still enjoyed tinkering with old systems and solving puzzles for friends, but now it was for the sheer joy of creation, for the art of it, not out of financial necessity. His mind, no longer burdened by the pressure of survival, was free to craft beauty and innovation in equal measure. He often brought Maya to the R&D lab, explaining complex concepts in simple, engaging terms, fostering her burgeoning interest in design and technology. The quiet dignity of a single father had found its extraordinary counterpart, and together they were poised to build something truly remarkable, not just for themselves, but for the world. 7 years later, the sprawling complex that once housed Thorn Aerospace's traditional hangars and offices had undergone a profound metamorphosis. What was once a bastion of conventional aviation was now the vibrant, cutting-edge Riley Thorn Innovations campus, a testament to collaborative vision and relentless progress. The air no longer just thick with the scent of jet fuel, and ambition pulsed with a new kind of energy, the precise hum of advanced robotics, the distant rhythmic clang of fabrication labs creating revolutionary new materials, and the occasional almost silent ascent of experimental drones. The very landscape had shifted with lush green spaces, replacing concrete and solar arrays glinting under the sun powering the entire facility. Maya, now 14, was a brilliant and confident young woman, her intellect as keen as her father's, yet tempered with her own joyful curiosity. The Thorne Riley Scholarship Program, a state-of-the-art facility built on what was once Elias Thorne's private, underutilized executive helipad, hummed with activity. Funded equally by Elias and Alex through Riley Thorne Innovations, it offered unparalleled opportunities in advanced STEM fields, focusing on aeronautical engineering, sustainable energy, and AI development for disadvantaged youth. Maya walked to school each morning with a gaggle of friends, her laughter bright and unburdened, her mind alight with new discoveries in theoretical physics and next-generation propulsion systems. She was a confident, curious child, untouched by the shadows that had once threatened their peace, a future brimming with possibility stretching out before her. She often interned at the Innovations campus, her own burgeoning interest in aerospace design, sparked by her father and Elias, her insights already surprising the seasoned professionals who found her youthful, optimistic approach a refreshing challenge to their conventional thinking. Alex Ace. Riley was no longer just a struggling single dad. He was a celebrated figure, a world-renowned aerospace visionary, and an invaluable asset to Riley Thorne Innovations. His office, a spacious, light-filled command center within the Innovations campus, was a hub of constant activity. As the head of Riley Thorne's Advanced Aerospace Division, he oversaw groundbreaking projects from fully autonomous cargo aircraft to revolutionary high-altitude atmospheric research drones that sampled air quality in previously unreachable regions. His quiet dignity and unwavering strength guided every decision, ensuring that every new development prioritized safety, ethical innovation, and environmental responsibility. His integrity, a powerful counterpoint to the ruthless greed and arrogance he had once encountered. He was no longer just designing planes. He was building a legacy, one of opportunity, technological advancement, and profound empowerment. His once almost illegible turbine engine tattoo, now clearly visible on his inner forearm, was no longer a hidden mark of a buried past, but a visible emblem, a testament to his incredible journey. He often wore short-sleeved shirts, openly displaying the discrete geometric symbol. It was the symbol of an elite clandestine humanitarian task force. He had once been a part of a unit dedicated to quiet, high-stakes interventions in global crises, often involving the rapid deployment and repair of specialized infrastructure in disaster zones. He now openly acknowledged this past, not with bravado, but with a calm acceptance, using his experiences to fuel his present purpose. He often lectured at prestigious universities and international conferences, sharing his unique insights on crisis response, sustainable engineering, and the critical importance of redundancy in complex systems, his unconventional perspective captivating audiences and inspiring a new generation of innovators. He spoke of how the most profound problems often required the most unconventional solutions, and how true resilience came from within a system and within a person, not from external forces or top-down mandates. Beyond his professional role, Alex had poured his heart into giving back to the community that had in its own way once shielded him and Maya. He established a thriving nonprofit foundation, largely funded by Elias Thorne and bolstered by numerous corporate and private donations, called the Flight Path Initiative. Its mission was simple, yet profound, to provide scholarships and mentorship for aspiring engineers from underprivileged backgrounds, particularly focusing on those who have faced significant life challenges and wish to pursue careers in aerospace and advanced technology. He personally mentored young men and women, often found in the newly built Community Learning Center adjacent to the campus, sharing not just technical skills, but more importantly, imparting lessons in resilience, integrity, and the quiet power of making a difference, even when no one was watching. He held workshops teaching everything from basic coding for drone operation to advanced materials science, from aerodynamic principles to entrepreneurship in the burgeoning green tech sector. His own experiences served as a powerful testament to the transformative power of a second chance, a life built on purpose. In a remarkable turn of events, Derek Vance, after serving his sentence for corporate sabotage and undergoing intensive therapy and reflection, eventually reached out to Alex. through a long, arduous process marked by hesitant apologies and slow, painful forgiveness. Derek began his own path to redemption. He eventually became one of the Flight Path Initiative's most dedicated, if quiet, volunteers. He worked behind the scenes, offering his organizational skills and logistical acumen, a testament to the profound power of redemption and the quiet strength of brotherly love. His own story, now a powerful cautionary tale and a beacon of hope for those seeking to turn their lives around. The story culminates on a warm, late-afternoon sunlight bathing the revitalized industrial landscape in a golden glow. Alex Maya and Elias Thorne stood together in the gleaming new main hangar of the Riley Thorne Innovations campus, admiring a newly unveiled concept, a fully autonomous zero-emission cargo aircraft, a fusion of Alex's visionary engineering and Elias's commitment to sustainable aviation, a project entirely conceptualized and brought to life by Alex's division. It was named the Spirit of Maya. Its sleek, almost organic chassis was made from recycled, ultra-lightweight composites. Its propulsion system ran on clean hydrogen fuel cells, and its internal systems were fully self-sufficient, a marvel of environmental responsibility and innovative design capable of operating for months without needing external energy input, delivering vital supplies to remote communities across the globe. As the Spirit of Maya gleamed under the soft, late-afternoon sun, its sleek, almost futuristic lines reflecting the tranquil waters of the adjacent bay, where it would soon undergo its final pre-flight tests. Alex put an arm around Lily, who now stood tall, her eyes sparkling with understanding and pride. He then interlaced his fingers with Elias Thorne's, a quiet gesture of profound camaraderie. He looked at Maya, now a bright-eyed, confident young woman, a future full of boundless potential stretching out before her. He looked at Elias, no longer a haughty CEO, but a trusted friend and partner. His heart, once burdened by the weight of an empty wallet and untold guilt, was full with a quiet, profound contentment. The once broken life of a single dad had soared beyond all expectations, reaching unimaginable heights, building a legacy not just of innovation, but of boundless hope. The world was still full of challenges, but for Alex and his family, the family he chose and the family he built, the future was an open horizon full of promise built on foundations of resilience, ingenuity, and boundless love. The quiet single dad from row 17, once invisible, had become the architect of tomorrow, leaving an indelible mark on the world, one dream, one flight at a time. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminds you that courage can alter destinies, and that light always finds a path, even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming narratives that delve into the profound human spirit and the power of unseen heroes. Thank you for joining our journey. The recycled air of the economy cabin hung heavy, tinged with the faint, persistent aroma of lukewarm coffee and recycled oxygen. Alex Ace Riley, a man whose late 30s carried the weary gravity of premature age, shifted uncomfortably in his cramped seat in row 17. The number felt symbolic of his current existence, anonymous, unremarkable, and far from the heights he once commanded. He was on a low-cost, last-minute flight to a distant city, a desperate pilgrimage for a job interview that barely promised to cover the travel expenses, let alone claw back at the mounting debt that felt like a physical weight in his threadbare wallet.